Our next speaker will be introducing one of our main speakers. Some of you will know Tasha Logan, who is Assistant City Manager for the City of Goldsboro, has been with the city since 2005. Tasha heads many functions within the city government, including several construction programs over the years. She manages 5 of the leadership sections within the city government, and Tasha received her master's degree in public administration from North Carolina State University and is currently a certified city manager. Please help me welcome Tasha to the podium.
Good morning again, and welcome to Envision East 2050. I have the distinct honor this morning of introducing our speaker for the morning, Mr. Ed McMahon. Aside from the information that you all may have been able to view in the guidebook, Mr. McMahon has been with the Urban Land Institute for 9 years, but involved with community development for more than 25 years. He has participated in 10 reality checks and is no stranger to the issues that face our communities, whether large or small. Today, he will share with us some of his expertise. Ed is married with 2 children, one of which you all will have the honor of seeing during his presentation. He currently resides in Tacoma Park, Maryland. He has a Master's of Arts in Urban Studies from the University of Alabama and a JD from Georgetown. If you will, please join me in welcoming our speaker for the morning, Mr. Ed McMahon.
Thank you, Tasha, and good morning, everybody. It's great to be here. I appreciate that warm introduction. I got to tell you something. It's always a little nerve-wracking to have an introduction with a group of people that you don't really know, and I never realized how risky that could be until my wife showed up at one of my talks, and I was really, of course, interested in what my wife had to say about what I would, talk about. And so I went up to her after my talk, and I said, "So what'd you think, honey?" She said, "Well, that was fine, but I want to talk about the introduction." She said, "That was ridiculous." She said, "The only thing they didn't say about you is they didn't say you were a model husband, now did they?" And I said, No, but good idea. Maybe I'll add that." And she says, "Go home and look it up in the dictionary. If you look up the definition of model, it's a small replica of the real thing." So, well, it's great to be here in Eastern North Carolina, and I am honored to participate in this event. You live in a great region, and you are great people, but growth and change are coming to North Carolina and to your 9-county region. Projections are that the United States will add 100 million people by 2050, that North Carolina will add several million, and that your region will grow to at least 840,000 citizens by the year 2032. The questions, of course, for you are, where will you put all these people? Where will they live and work and play? And what will the employment opportunities be for new and existing residents? And then, of course, how will Eastern North Carolina compete with all the other fast-growing regions in a rapidly changing world? I want to tell you how I got interested in this issue. 1969, I was a young second lieutenant in the United States Army, and I had just finished jungle warfare training, and I was getting ready to go to Vietnam with many of my contemporaries. And one day, about a week before I'm supposed to fly to Vietnam, I got a call from the Pentagon, and I had a colonel on the other end of the line. He's with the Personnel Division. He says to me, "Lieutenant McMahon, do you have any interest in being reassigned to Germany?" And I'm like, "Okay, let me think about that. Germany or Vietnam? Germany or Vietnam?" "Yeah." I said, "Germany sounds very exciting. I would love to go to Germany." And I got very, very lucky, and I was sent to Heidelberg, Germany, which is the headquarters for the U.S. military in Europe, and I was assigned as an aide to a U.S. general. And I spent 2.5 years of my life flying all over Europe on that helicopter. And that experience completely and totally changed my life. But of course, I didn't realize how much it would change my life till I flew home to Birmingham, Alabama, where I grew up, and I got out of the airplane and drove home. And for the first time ever, I saw the American landscape with a completely different set of eyes. Because, ladies and gentlemen, to travel is to learn. And that's really what today is about. It's about learning from each other about what matters about our region and our hometowns and how we can make these places better places to live in, to work in, to visit. You know, in ancient Athens, city leaders used to take an oath of office to leave that great city not less, but greater, more beautiful, and prosperous than it was left to them. And I believe that's your challenge as well. How do you leave Eastern North Carolina not less, but greater, more beautiful, and prosperous than it was left to you? You know, Abraham Lincoln said the best way to predict the future is to create it yourself. You know, at the Urban Land Institute where I work, we have been spending a lot of time working on this concept of community and regional visioning and regional economic development. Now, I have learned that a lot of people don't understand these concepts, so I thought I'd say a few things about what they're really all about. Tasha mentioned my son. There he is. He's 32 years old today. But, you know, I like this picture because it reminds me about what today is really about. It's about our children. It's about our grandchildren. It's about the future, and it's about planning for the future. You know, it's also about balance. It's about harmony. It's about the relationship between conservation and economic development, between the built environment and the natural environment, between downtowns and the countryside. And perhaps most important and fundamental of all, it's about that relationship between people and the land. You know, it's also about finding win-win solutions to the problems that face us today, things that are good for business, good for the environment, and good for the community. I believe we spend way too much time in America fighting about what we disagree about and not nearly enough time sitting down together, community by community, to talk about what we do agree about. Thank you. And I think one of the things you'll find today is that there's a lot of agreement in this room about how you should grow and why. You know, regional problems require regional solutions, whether it's agricultural preservation or air pollution or water pollution or traffic congestion or loss of green space or job creation. These are all regional problems. They all require regional solutions. You know, it's also about working together. You know, if you don't work together, you can fail separately. And it's particularly true to think about regions today in an incredibly competitive world where the world is changing very, very fast. And you know, there's this wonderful book by Stephen Covey about the 7 habits of highly effective individuals. His first 3 habits were to begin with the end in mind, to think win-win, to seek first to understand and then to be understood. And I think those are your challenges as well. How do we do this as a region? What is the end that we should begin with? How do we think win-win? How do we seek to understand and then to be understood? Today is about finding common values and commitments, whether you're a farmer, a developer, environmentalist, an elected official, a soccer mom, whoever. And of course, you will find that there are many common values and commitments in this room. Economic success, ladies and gentlemen, is about choices. You know, you can have the kind of community you're given, or you can create the kind of community that you want. You know, visioning is about choices. Should you invest downtown, or should you invest outside of town? Should you continue to spread out, or should you grow perhaps a little more compactly? You know, it's about choices. And I can tell you something, that doing nothing is a choice. Doing nothing is a choice. You know, a lot of people, I understand, don't like change, but the world is changing whether you like it or not. There's only 2 kinds of change in the world today, planned change and unplanned change. And I promise you, unplanned change will destroy every single thing about the region you live in, everything you love, unless you plan for the future. You know, and it's also about becoming more competitive in the world we live in today. You know, communities and regions are in a global competition to attract and retain a talented workforce. And increasingly, these talented young people are choosing where they live first and figuring out their job situations later. So how do we keep young people in our region? And then we say to ourselves, well, why do this now? And as I've already said, it's because the world is changing, the economy is changing, our population is growing, our demographics are changing. We have all these new technologies. How about energy issues? How about infrastructure? How about changing consumer attitudes and trends? Let's just talk about the economy, for example. Many commentators say that the recession is fundamentally reshaping the American economy, and that how we live, work, shop, and move around is going to change, and that communities that embrace the future will prosper, those that do not will fail. For example, would you rather invest in Kodak or Apple? Would you rather look backwards or would you rather look forward? The old model of economic development was about cheap land, cheap gas, low-cost positioning. It was about shotgun recruitment. It was about smokestack chasing. The new model for economic development is very different. It's about laser recruitment. It's about high-value positioning. It's about focusing not on what you don't have, it's focusing on what you do have. And I can tell you that in the world we live in today, the most important infrastructure investment is no longer roads. The most important infrastructure investment is education. Education. So what about population growth? Yes, the United States is the fastest growing industrialized nation in the world. We're adding 100 million people by the year 2050. Some projections say 1 million new people in eastern North Carolina. 300,000 new jobs. And then we're seeing huge demographic shifts in the United States. What are some of those? Well, we're getting older, we're getting younger, we're getting more single people, fewer couples having children. Somebody turns 65 every 8 seconds in America today. I turned 65 last week. That's going to happen for 16 years every second. And but there's a bigger generation, it's called Gen Y. And that's, the biggest generation ever in American history. And that generation turns out to want very different kind of things. They're the first technological generation. And one of the things we've seen is the death of distance. You can do business anywhere. So what are the implications of that for you here in eastern North Carolina? It's amazing that cities like Baltimore and Pittsburgh lost 50% of their manufacturing jobs over the last decade. But at the same time, they grew jobs in education, medicine, and technology by 120%. Did you know that in 60 of the 100 largest communities in America, that the biggest employer is either a university or a hospital today? So how are we leveraging those kind of institutions? And then what about energy prices? Well, yes, we are drilling more today. We're importing less. That's good news. But prices, ladies and gentlemen, are set by a global marketplace. What do you really think is the long-term trend for energy prices in America? And anybody who thinks that the long-term trend for energy prices is to go down, let me say one word to you: China. China. Or how about India or Brazil or Africa? It's all about rising worldwide demand for energy. What do you think happens to all these strips like US 70 when gas reaches $5 a gallon or $6 a gallon? It's already $10 a gallon in Europe. But the difference, and one of the things I learned in Europe is the Europeans, they don't hate cars. They love cars just as much as we do. The big difference is they don't have to use them all the time, because they have far more transportation choice than we do. And then there's, the way we've been developing for the last 50 years in America. Large lot subdivisions, strip commercial. It's interesting that as American families kept getting smaller and smaller, each and every person kept using more and more land. And that, of course, meant we had to drive everywhere for everything. I can tell you, I've lived in the Washington metropolitan area now for almost 40 years, and we have never not been widening Interstate 95 during that time. Never. And I can tell you that one of the things we've learned, if you think the only solution to traffic congestion is to widen the highway, that's a little like letting out your belt to fight obesity. And then, of course, we do want the best roads, we do want the best schools, we do want the best of everything. We're just not willing to pay for it. We don't want to raise taxes. No, don't do that. And then we don't want to pay tolls. We don't want user fees. So, of course, we have now this huge deficit in America of investing in the future. And one of the things I want to say to you this morning is, why would anybody invest in a community or region that wouldn't invest in itself? And then consumer attitudes are changing. Market trends are changing. The old one-size-fits-all model for whether it's home building or commercial development no longer works. And I'll say a few more words about that in a minute. You know, I think we've done a pretty good job here in North Carolina and across America of saving some of our landmarks like this, but we've done a much less good job of saving the landscape that gives those landmarks their larger and greater sense of meaning. And you know, we've done a pretty good job, I believe, also of cleaning up our air and water pollution. And yes, our air is cleaner, and yes, our water is cleaner, but at the same time, we have simultaneously been losing our sense of place. I mean, if I were to take you up in an airplane tomorrow morning and then just suddenly drop you along a road outside of most American cities, you wouldn't have any idea where you were because it all looks exactly the same. I mean, where is that? Is that Albany, Allentown, Providence, Pittsburgh, Charlotte, or Cincinnati? Who can tell? You know, Wallace Stegner, the great American writer, once said, if you don't know where you are, you don't know who you are. And by that, I think he meant that all of us, every American, has a fundamental need for a sense of orientation, for a sense of roots, for a sense of place. Sense of place. What is that? Well, it's a couple of things. First, it's what makes your hometown different from my hometown. But more important, ladies and gentlemen, I believe sense of place is explicitly that which makes our physical surroundings worth caring about. That which makes our physical surroundings worth caring about. I can tell you that in many parts of the world today, we're suffering the social, economic, and environmental consequences of creating places that just aren't worth caring about. And for all the improvements in cleaner air and cleaner water, better roads, faster computers, people still say, is this all there is? Can't our communities be more distinctive, more livable, more beautiful? Can't we have more connection with nature and the outdoors? So these are some of the issues we're going to talk about today, the patterns of development. Where do you put development? How do you arrange development? What does that development look like? It seems to me, ladies and gentlemen, that the first principle of better development anywhere in America is to figure out where you should not develop. And I'll tell you something funny about those houses. Guess what? They're all gone now. Because, you know, building out in front of the dune line at the beach is really not the smartest thing in the world to do. So, you know, whether it's at the site level, the neighborhood level, or the regional level, figuring out where you should not develop is probably the first step to fostering better development. And it's also the single best way to reduce opposition to new development. It's kind of like you're driving down the interstate highway at, 70 miles an hour and you hit a fog bank. What are you going to do? You're going to slam the brakes on because you can't see where you're going. Well, that's exactly what Americans wanted to do with development in this country when they couldn't see what the future looked like. You have an opportunity to shape the future. And then there's this issue of how we arrange development. I already talked about we can spread out or we can grow more compactly. We can have single-use development like this Best Buy, drive only, or we can have it a Best Buy like this that's compact, mixed use, and walkable. Now, I understand that everybody doesn't want to sleep upstairs and shop downstairs, but a lot of people do like that idea, like some of the 75% of American households who do not have school-age children. That's right, 75% of all American households have no school-age children. A lot of them, like me, empty nesters, retirees, unrelated singles, young professionals. Turns out they would like to live in a neighborhood like this. And even in a small town, mixed-use development can be pretty simple. Welcome to Herndon, Virginia. There's a new Dairy Queen with a dentist office upstairs. How appropriate. And think about it. Would you rather live next door to a house full of out-of-control teenagers or next to a dentist office? Which one would have more impact on your quiet enjoyment of your community? And then let's talk about what development looks like. And just like with meeting a person, a good first impression is important and a bad first impression is hard to change. You think you'd rather visit the town of Franklin, Tennessee, or would you rather go to the town of Midfield, Alabama? Which one looks like a community with a sense of pride and a sense of place? Which one would you rather invest time or money in? Ladies and gentlemen, if you don't remember anything else I say this morning, remember this. The image of a community or region is fundamentally important to its economic well-being. What do I mean by that? What I mean is that every single day in America, people make decisions about where to live, where to invest, where to vacation, where to retire, based on what our communities look like. what they look like. Yes, community character does matter. And distinctiveness has value. Sameness, ladies and gentlemen, is a minus, not a plus in the world we live in today. And it's because you can run a business anywhere in the world. Let me give you an example. This is Foster Friess. He's a prominent supporter of Governor Romney's campaign for president. He runs a mutual fund company called the Brandywine Investment Group, and for 40 years this company was headquartered in Valley Forge, Pennsylvania. That is a busy suburb of Philadelphia. But Foster Friess likes to fly fish. So every summer he would fly out to Jackson, Wyoming to go fly fishing. But then one day he's back in Philadelphia. He's stuck in traffic on the Schuylkill Expressway. And all of a sudden a light bulb goes on in his mind. He says, hey, what am I doing here? I can run a mutual fund company anywhere in the world. So he picked up his entire company and moved it into downtown Jackson, Wyoming. That is now the largest private sector employer in Jackson. And do you know why it's there? One reason alone: access to outdoor recreation. When you think about it, these are some of the reasons why people might want to locate to eastern North Carolina. Scenic beauty, a quality environment, a good place to raise a family, access to outdoor recreation, small town atmosphere. You've got lots of great assets. You need to build on and enhance those assets. And what are some of the things that we can do to create better development? Well, let's talk about things like high quality design. Yeah, walkable can be attractive and valuable, and compact design, has to come with compensating amenities, things like sidewalks and green space and parks and bike paths. And we do lots of research at ULI, and one of the things we found is there are literally hundreds of studies, that's right, hundreds of studies that document the positive relationship between green space and property values. Here's an example of that. Where do you think the most valuable land in all of New York State is? There it is. It's the land next to Central Park. The park enhances the value of adjacent properties. And the same thing works in a rural area as well. We have 16,000 green space developments in America. We call them golf course developments. And why did builders build houses next to golf courses? Because they found they could charge a lot premium for living there. But guess what, ladies and gentlemen? Did you know that the vast majority of buyers in golf course developments in America do not play golf? So you say, well, why'd you buy the house there? And they go, oh, we like the view across the fairway. We like to live next to protected open space. Well, like, duh. What does it cost to build a golf course? Millions of dollars. What does it cost to maintain a golf course? Millions of dollars. What does it cost to leave the open space alone in the first place? Like almost nothing. So maybe you could start building a golf course development without the golf course. And by the way, what's the most popular form of outdoor recreation in America? It's not golf, it's walking for pleasure. Number one by far. All right, so I want to end by talking for a few minutes about the secrets of successful communities. I've been doing this for a long time. And first and foremost, successful communities have a vision for the future. Yes, some people might call that a plan for the future. Now, I understand there's some people in America who think planning is a dirty word. But I want to ask you this. You tell me the name of any successful organization, institution, corporation, or community that doesn't plan for the future. Failing to plan simply means planning to fail. The book of Proverbs says, without vision, the people will perish. My dad used to tell me the story of Oliver Wendell Holmes. He was America's longest-serving Supreme Court justice. And the story goes, he's on a train in the South in the 1930s, and the conductor's coming along to get the tickets. And he gets to Justice Holmes, and he says, "Ticket, please." And the justice goes in his pocket, and he can't find his ticket. But the conductor recognizes him because he's a very famous guy. He's a United States Supreme Court justice. He says, "Hey, don't worry about it. I know who you are. I don't need your ticket." And Justice Holmes says, no, I have to have it. And he starts going in his briefcase and pulling out all his papers. And the doctor says again, "Listen, hey, I don't need your ticket. I know who you are." And he goes, no, I have to have it. And then he gets his suitcase out, starts pulling everything out of his suitcase. And the conductor says the third time, "Really, I'm telling you, I don't need your ticket." And he goes, "Young man, you don't understand. I don't know where to get off this train." And of course, the moral is, if you don't care where you're going, it simply doesn't matter what train you take. And then successful communities build all of their plans, whether it's an economic development plan, a land use plan, a tourism plan, what have you, about the enhancement, around the enhancement of their existing assets. And then they use education, incentives, partnerships, and voluntary initiatives, not just regulation. And then you know what the biggest impediment to better development in a small town in the South is, ladies and gentlemen? I'll tell you what it is. It's a fear of saying no to anything. Well, if you're afraid to say no to anything, you will get the worst of everything. Communities that set low standards or no standards will compete to the bottom. Communities that set high standards will compete to the top. Successful communities cooperate for mutual benefit. It's not about Jones County versus Duplain County. It's about this region collectively. Successful communities have strong leaders and committed citizens. Let me show you a few examples. When I was growing up in Birmingham, this was the one city we used to make fun of, Chattanooga, Tennessee. Now, what does that tell you? You know, this was routinely referred to as a patch of rust in the Sun Belt. It was called the most polluted city in America. Nobody makes fun of Chattanooga anymore today, ladies and gentlemen, because now it's known as an international model for better development. And people come from all over the world now to go to Chattanooga to see what they've done. It all began with a vision for the future. You know, they decided, for example, to build a park along the Tennessee River. The cost of that park, projected cost, was $30 million. That's a big number for a small city, but they realized something incredibly important. The most important question is not how much does it cost. That's the second most important question. The most important question facing any community in America is, what should we do? What should we do? And money almost always follows good ideas, especially if those ideas come out of a community consensus building process. Let me show you a small town example. Welcome to Susan City, California. 1990, this was voted the worst place to live in Northern California. That's their city hall. It was in 2 double-wide trailers. This was the only city hall in California that had to register with the Department of Motor Vehicles. But you know, public buildings are kind of important. They ought to set the standard in a community, and they always did before World War II. They were always our most beautiful buildings. Whether it was the courthouse, the public school, the library, and they were always in the middle of our communities. But then after that, starting in 1960, we decided cheaper was better. Well, it turns out one of the things we've learned is cheaper is simply cheaper. Ladies and gentlemen, why would anyone invest in a community that wouldn't invest in itself? So, you know, they built a new city hall right on that same spot in Susan City, California, and 1 decade later, this place was voted one of the best places to live in Northern California, but it all began with an investment in themselves. Successful communities inventory their assets, economic, cultural, human, educational. And then they build their plans around those assets. And sometimes the assets of the community are very obvious. Welcome to Jackson, Wyoming. World-class scenery. Unbelievable wildlife resources. Or how about Annapolis, Maryland, this incredible architectural legacy. But sometimes the assets of the community are not very obvious. Welcome to Lowell, Massachusetts, a dying industrial city. Thought it had no assets, but what it had was abandoned textile mills and an unemployment rate of 27%. It had never seen a single tourist, but somebody said maybe we could restore those mills. Today, this is the Charleston, South Carolina of New England. Today, this city gets 1 million tourists a year. Today, this city has an unemployment rate below the national average. It all began with a plan to reuse their greatest asset. You know, successful communities cooperate for mutual benefit. You know, whether it's in a rural area like the eastern shore of Maryland or in an urban area like the Washington metro area, you know, if you don't work together, you can fail separately. You know, and think about the research triangle. You know, it used to be an economy based on tobacco and furniture, and all the young people left. And then the business leadership of the community said, you know, we're going to make an intentional decision to capitalize on the research power of 3 great universities. And today they've created the greatest research park in America. And young people moved to this area again. It all began with a vision. Successful communities use education, incentives, partnerships, and voluntary initiatives. Why do we educate? Why do we do a day like today? We educate in order to reduce the need to regulate. We educate because people will not embrace what they don't understand. We educate because you have a right to choose the future. but to know what the choices are. And then we also need to use incentives. We need to use carrots, not just sticks. And let me show you an example. This is the Lone Star Brewery. It sat vacant in San Antonio, Texas for 25 years until they used an historic preservation tax credit to turn it into a world-class museum of art, an incentive. Successful communities pick and choose from development proposals. All development is not created equal. You know, let me give you an example. I was in Fayetteville, Arkansas recently, and I saw these two waffle houses. The one on the right is a typical waffle house. It's out by the highway. It has, lots of parking, but nobody lives near it. Here's a new Waffle House in downtown Fayetteville. It has apartments upstairs. It's on a walkable street. There's no parking in front of that one. Which one makes more money? Well, as it turns out, the Waffle House in downtown Fayetteville makes 15% more than the one on the Strip. And of course, why is that? Well, for a lot of reasons. Number one, you can walk that one. But here's something you got to think about, something in the real estate world we call the place-making dividend. That means people stay longer, spend more money, and come back more often to places that attract their affection. What kind of places are we creating that can attract our affection? There are also places that are incredibly good for business. You know, successful communities have a group of hometown heroes. That's people like you who are willing to work to see that your vision, whatever it is, actually gets implemented. And I understand it's not always easy in a small town and a rural area in America. And no matter what you come up with today, there will be some people who will be against it. They will tell you can't do it, won't work, already tried it, costs too much. And yes, no is a powerful word in rural America. But do you know what a more powerful word is? Yes. Yes, we can make this a better place to live in, to look at, to work in, to visit. Ladies and gentlemen, a pessimist sees difficulty in every opportunity. An optimist sees opportunity in every difficulty. You know, then, of course, there's this idea of leadership. And if you don't care who gets the credit, you can get an awful lot done. And, I love this quote from Monty Python. It says, apart from sanitation, medicine, education, wine, public order, roads, irrigation, public health, and a fresh water system, what have the Romans ever done for us? Ladies and gentlemen, you can grow without destroying the things that people love. I congratulate you for what you're doing today, and I wish you well. Thank you so much for having me here today.